Hi, everyone. As it says, I'm Ben Wellington. I'm a data storyteller. If you had asked me a year ago what a data storyteller was, I would probably say I have no idea what a data storyteller is. So today, I'm going to tell you about my journey over the last year, where I've accidentally became a data storyteller. I'm going to tell you about what I learned along the way, and maybe convince some of you that you too can be data storytellers if you're curious and want to. So first, in stories, you want to connect with people's experiences, right? If you're doing an improv scene, you learn, if you're brushing your teeth next to your wife, and that's something that we people can relate to, how they look when they're brushing their teeth. You can do a scene through that, and people will kind of relate to it because they have experiences there. So I try to write about things that New Yorkers experience, and I figured, what do New Yorkers experience more than Dwayne Reed? Right? So I thought this might be interesting. It turned out it was. I mapped every single building in New York to the closest pharmacy, and I colored it by the pharmacy. Orange is Dwayne Reed, red is CVS, blue is Walgreens, yellow is Rite Aid. I mapped the whole, first of all, this neighborhood, yeah, it's Dwayne Reed country. No question. I also learned that CVS and Rite Aid are attacking from the water. Good strategy, CVS. Come in from the Hudson. Dwayne Reed will not see you coming. And I thought to myself, is Dwayne Reed really a New York thing? It turns out, no, it's a Manhattan thing. If we zoom out even more, the Bronx is Rite Aid country. And really, Brooklyn and Queens are just a patchwork. This is interesting. If you work for one of those companies, it's probably very interesting. For me, it's interesting just wondering what our experiences are and how we can start to quantify them and tell stories of our lives. So really, that's something that we can all kind of relate to, and that's part of storytelling, even in data analysis. The other thing I noticed is you want to focus on a single idea, right? In an improv scene, you can try to have 7 ideas going, but things can get lost pretty quickly. So in my work, I try to focus on one idea. And when I went and looked at city bike data is interesting. There's people leaving stations, coming to stations. There's a lot of data. What if we take one idea, and that idea is gender? Okay? Here, I've mapped the % of male and female riders on city bike riders in New York City. What we can see is that in this neighborhood, over 80% of the riders are male. So this is a very male-dominant city bike neighborhood. What does that tell us? It could be about our transportation infrastructure. It could be, it's a study of gender here in the city. And also, if you're looking to meet a girl on a city bike, go to Brooklyn. That's important. But what the important thing here is it's one idea. It's just gender. There's a lot of columns in that data. It's a big data set, but let's study just one. The other thing is keep it simple. So not just one idea, but one simple idea. Ideas can be very complex, and you find yourself in improv thinking, oh, well, if this guy goes here and this, and you're just going to lose everybody very quickly. So I also try to keep it simple. So when people hear that I do math, they often think like I do this. But it's more like this. I mean, I just count things. I do sums. Maybe I do a percentage. And this is all just sort of high school math. It's not crazy math. So people can really do this if they stop and start to ask the questions. So an example, I looked at the % of parking tickets from out-of-state plates in every precinct in New York. And what we see is in this neighborhood, there's a higher % of people coming in from out of state and getting tickets, which is telling, right? That's people driving into Midtown, more likely. As you get farther out in our boroughs, there's less travelers. Also makes sense. But I also want to do this per state. So first I was like, Jersey, Midtown. Yes, it shows in the data that new people from New Jersey are driving into Midtown. If you look at Connecticut, completely different picture. They're coming in from the north. You can actually see it. They're going to the botanical gardens in the Bronx. And my absolute favorite, Californians. Where do you think they hang out? The hippest parts of Brooklyn. Williamsburg, Bushwick, Greenpoint. That's where people from California get parking tickets. And with this, you want to try to make an impact. I've tried to make an impact in city government by doing some of this work. Each of you has your own ways you can make impacts. In particular, I did one proof, a mathematical proof that no matter how many times you ride the subway and refill using their buttons, you can't get a zero balance. Like literally, it's not just you or you or you. You literally can't get a zero balance if you use their buttons. So there's a trick. You can type 1905 and get a balance. And when I wrote about this, the MTA responded. So all right, maybe there's an impact. And they said, these machines do not hold an infinite amount of change. And the denominations are suggested to ensure there is ample change to accommodate customers who pay with cash. That being said, we will certainly look at this as part of the process involved in rolling out the next fare increase. So the fare increase is coming. We'll see that. Imagine in a world in March where you're like, I want $20 in a Metro card, and you get $20 in a Metro card. Like, how much would that be? And they say $18.43, and you pay. As opposed to now, I'm going to pay $20. We're going to give you a random amount above that. Imagine if we switch that. We can run our city better, right? So we'll see if the MTA follows through. I'd love to make an impact there. I also found something strange, which is that in half the city cabs, the tipping is based on just the fare and the surcharge. So if you get into a Verifone cab and you hit the 20% button, you're actually paying 20% on top of the taxi fare and a little bit of a surcharge. But if it's run by Creative Mobile Technologies, the other half of the cab, and you hit the 20% button, you're paying on top of taxes and tolls. So for two different computers, you're paying more tips in one of the computer setups than the other because it's calculating tip on top of tolls. And is this a big deal? Well, those drivers are making $250 more a year in tips by this little bit of rounding. So we have half our cabs where we're all paying a little more, and the drivers are being paid more, which isn't a bad thing, but it's kind of inequitable. When I pointed this out to the TLC, they said, "We appreciate the work that went into his analysis, and we're giving it a thorough read." Impact. All right, so I'm working on it. And my favorite was this. I mapped fire hydrants in New York City. And these aren't just any fire hydrants. These are the fire hydrants mapped by the amount of parking ticket revenue they're creating. So these are the top 250 culprits in New York City. First, on the Upper East Side, watch out. The 19th precinct will ticket you no matter where you park for a hydrant, apparently. But more interesting were these two hydrants that were down on the Lower East Side. And they were generating $55,000 a year in tickets. Two hydrants, $55,000 for like 5 or 6 years. So finally, the data's public. I had a look. And when I went to figure out what was happening, it turns out that there's basically a hydrant and then what looks kind of like a bike lane and then a parking spot. So you go in and you're like, I'm not in front of the curb or the hydrant. There's a bike lane between us. Well, it turns out that while the DOT painted a parking spot, the NYPD disagreed. And so they would ticket the spot for years and years. And this is actually a shot from the Google Street View car going by, and it caught the ticket, which I really appreciated. Really appreciated. So I wrote about that, and I heard from the city again. While the DOT has not received any complaints about this location, we will review the roadway markings and make any appropriate alterations. That's an action statement. We're getting better. So I thought to myself, well, government, I'm going to keep trying to make an impact. And suddenly, they repainted the spot. Yeah. Impact. So somebody's listening. This is great. So you can look at your data, and you can have an impact. Sometimes maybe your message isn't going to get through. But for each of these things where I know a statement was made, I know that I've changed at least some thinking in these agencies, that somebody is now thinking about this thing. So I consider those to be making impact as well. And if you think, and to do that, once again, I think you really need to think about some of the things about storytelling, like connect with people, try to convey one idea, keep it simple, and explore the things that you know best. And in case you think that, oh, this whole data thing is not for me, that's for computer people, the Open Data Portal is really easy to use. I teach a class of statistics at Pratt for urban planners. And in our second day of class, one of my students turned this, which is a list of accidents in the neighborhood around Pratt, to this analysis of injuries by vehicle type. And this is just for one or two classes using Excel. This is not some crazy programming thing. And if you're scared of that, this is a data set of graffiti or 311 complaints, and a student in a program called City Term, which brings students to learn about the city. It's a high school semester in the city program. A student named Abby created this map. So if you're scared of computers, that's OK too. Understanding where graffiti is in New York City. So it's not about being a computer. Anyone can take data. You just have to know what questions to ask and try to tell your own story. And I just hope everyone realizes that anyone here can be a data storyteller. Thank you.